Post-rebellion housing in Newark, from dilapidation to gentrification. Newark's housing crisis and the lead-up to the 1967 Newark Rebellion played a key role in what would eventually occur in July of 1967. Systemic racial discrimination and segregation were pervasive in housing, exemplified by the redlining of black neighborhoods by the federally sponsored Homeowners Loan Corporation. Redlining accelerated the decay of predominantly minority inner-city neighborhoods by withholding mortgage capital. Predominantly black neighborhoods were also neglected in terms of public services and infrastructure. Much of the housing in which Newark's black population lived was in substandard condition, with overcrowding, inadequate sanitation, insufficient ventilation, and fire safety issues just to start. The civil unrest that occurred in Newark, New Jersey in July of 1967, triggered by the beating of a black taxi driver, but primed by decades of mistreatment, resulted in extensive property damage, loss of life, and thousands of arrests. In the aftermath of the unrest, the housing situation in Newark deteriorated even further. Many businesses were razed, and many businesses, particularly those owned by whites, left the city, accelerating the economic decline. The destruction of homes left many residents displaced. White flight accelerated as white residents relocated to the suburbs, leaving behind predominantly black neighborhoods with a declining tax base and property values. Soon after the 1967 riots ended, discussions began about making progress in Newark, but by almost every metric, not a lot had improved in the two successive decades. Newark's population declined by a further 100,000, and it gained the lingering reputation of a failed city. The Newark Master Plan, 1978, reported that in 1978, 40% of the housing stock in Newark was rated as being in good condition, 41.9% in fair condition, and 16.3% in deteriorating condition. The percentage of housing in the deteriorating class increased by 43% since 1970, from 13,400 to 19,200 units. A combination of the aging housing stock, accelerated turnover rates in older neighborhoods, and a lack of private investment within these neighborhoods were given as reasons for this continued decline. A study in 1973 reported that Newark had the worst housing conditions of any large U.S. city. Even those in Newark agreed. Robert Noddy, the Newark Housing Authority director at the time, called the findings very valid. The NHA at the time was struggling on many fronts. They owed money to PSE&G, who were threatening to cut off service at NHA buildings. There was a rent strike in public housing to protest dangerous living conditions. 10,000 Newarkers even signed a petition for the demolition of Columbus Homes, a building not even 20 years old with an abandoned unit rate of about 20%. From 1972 to 1976, the city foreclosed on more than 1,000 houses each year. Thousands of fires and a depressed real estate market resulted in a 12% fall in assessed property value from 1972 to 1976 alone. At the same time, real estate values shot up in the surrounding primarily white suburbs, further expanding the wealth disparity between them and the primarily black population of Newark. The master plan included ways in which housing in Newark needed improvements, including stabilizing residential areas, revitalizing and upgrading existing housing stock, increasing the variety of housing types, making developing medium to high density housing in certain areas easier, reducing the mixing of residential areas with incompatible land uses such as industry, and adapting existing non-residential structures into residential ones. This plan also discusses Newark's construction of subsidized housing units. During the early 1960s, the city began extensive efforts to eliminate substandard housing and construct a substantial number of new subsidized housing units. Clearance and redevelopment for 17 urban renewal areas, together with land acquisition for highway development, dramatically altered the pattern of housing, particularly in the central area of Newark. The combination of city renewal efforts, the social unrest of the 60s, and the national trends of central city decline resulted in a general decline of total housing stock, outmigration of white population with redistribution of minority populations in most neighborhoods of the city, and increases in the rate of housing stock loss due to abandonment and fire. Urban renewal projects largely took place from 1949 to 1967 in Newark, with hundreds of millions of dollars spent, more spending per capita than any of the other 30 major cities in the U.S. Over the course of these renewals, tens of thousands of buildings were demolished and 50,000 people were displaced, the majority of whom were black and Hispanic. Thousands of individual houses were knocked down to make way for the I-78 highway and the campuses of Rutgers here, what is now NJIT, and the University of Medicine and Dentistry. With the reactivation of federal housing programs and grants in 1974 after their suspension due to the recession, Newark subsequently accelerated its own housing program. It began major housing rehabilitation programs in certain neighborhoods and increased the demolition of abandoned, decaying, and fire-damaged buildings. It began a program of distributing housing assistance to lower-income households and attracting new middle-income residents to the city. In 1984, 15% of Newarkers lived in public housing, compared to 10% in 1978. Because of financial issues and mismanagement, though, 1/3 of Newark's existing public housing units were left uninhabitable and vacant in 1984. From 1986 to 2006, under Mayor James Sharp, over 40 housing projects were torn down in Newark. Between 1980 and 1988, there were some significant markers of improvement for Newark's economic and housing troubles. House prices rose 50%, signaling some confidence in the future of Newark from private capital. Plans for market-rate residential units were increasingly being submitted. The relocation of Blue Cross Blue Shield and the approval of plans for a $180 million art center were both promising signs for downtown Newark. Most officials in Newark point to the New Jersey Performing Arts Center as the first project that coaxed outsiders back to the city's downtown when it opened in 1997. In a Politico magazine article from 2015, Is Newark the Next Brooklyn?, Jeffrey Robinson, the academic director at the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development at Rutgers Business School, said the following, quote, "It was seen as a cultural symbol of reinvestment in one of the first new buildings in the downtown area when it opened," unquote. At the same time, though, a study found that the percentage of poor families in Newark rose in every ward between 1970 and 1990. For example, in the Central Ward, the percentage rose from 30.8% to 34.5%. Many of the achievements and improvements touted by politicians and administrations since the rebellion had not reached those who it mattered the most to. While the downtown streets of Newark were rebounding, the rest of the city was mostly left to fend for itself. By the turn of the century, though, Newark's population had stabilized, opening up new opportunities for growth. The 2021 New York Times article, "One Property at a Time, A City Tries to Revive Without Gentrifying," highlights examples of Newark's recovery through adaptive reuse. Construction workers in the South Ward of Newark, one of New Jersey's most distressed areas, are busy converting a long-abandoned bank into an apartment building and Poets Cafe. A decrepit mansion in the Central Ward, built by Newark beer baron before the turn of the 20th century, is being revamped as a maker-hood, a first-of-its-kind co-working residential and retail space. The former project, the Poets Cafe, is actually the future location of a parklet designed and built by my classmates and I for a second-year studio. In the past, downtown Newark received the most benefit from Newark's redevelopment, but now the benefits are slowly seeping farther towards the periphery. The New York Times article written by Tracy Tully attributes this to a push to expand affordable housing and homeownership in the renter-heavy city, and as a part of a deliberate push to overcome Newark's long legacy of blight without pushing out residents. Recent efforts have tried to boost homeownership and wealth growth for lower and middle-income Newarkers. In 2021, the homeownership rate in Newark was about 22%, a not insignificant jump from 1984's figure of 14%. Newark's urban fabric is still scarred by over 2,000 vacant lots, reminders of the rebellion in 1967 and the tough decades that followed. Tully writes that in the last 5 years, more than 3,500 units of affordable housing have also been built or are underway, much of it outside of downtown. In 2018, Newark passed an ordinance that required builders of more than 30 units to set aside 20% of those units as affordable housing, with rental priority for Newarkers. The average price of land rose 30% from 2019 to 2020. And in the 1978 Newark Master Plan, vacant land was listed as taking up approximately 10% of Newark's footprint. In the 2022 Newark 360 Master Plan, that had reduced to 5%. This is a promising sign for those communities hoping to benefit from the Newark Renaissance, but it may also mark the beginnings of gentrification and displacement if not adequately countered. Who Owns Newark? A report from Rutgers Newark Center on Law, Inequality, and Metropolitan Equity, released in 2022, unearthed that almost half of all real estate in Newark has been owned by corporations since 2019. These privately owned neighborhoods are now beholden only to the rent-seeking motives of the corporations who own their housing. This also has the effect of further barring the majority Black and Hispanic residents of Newark from home ownership, and one of the largest enablers of familial wealth. According to many studies, the solution to rising housing costs borne out in the data seems to be that we should be building more homes. Xiaodi Li's paper in the Journal of Economic Geography, "Do New Housing Units in Your Backyard Raise Your Rents?", published in 2021, discusses the effects of new market-rate housing on adjacent rents. This study reinforces the concept that new market-rate development creates a supply effect, easing the demand pressure on established housing stock, thus reducing rents. An article in the Review of Economics and Statistics titled "Local Effects of Large New Apartment Buildings in Low-Income Areas" further explores this issue. They found that new buildings, quote, decrease rents in nearby units by about 6% relative to units slightly farther away or near sites developed later, and they increase in-migration from low-income areas, unquote. This article also states that new buildings attract high-income households, which considerably increases the local housing stock. New York's housing crisis is beginning to impact Newark like it has in the outer boroughs of New York and like it has in Hudson County. Luckily, it seems that Newark is following the data and is upzoning land while permitting the construction of a substantial number of new units, exemplified by the Halo Tower here, the new tallest residential building in Newark, with nearly 1,000 new units of housing, of which 20% will be affordable. Efforts to address the housing problem in Newark post-rebellion achieved mixed success. The urban renewal projects that attempted to remove blight and revitalize neighborhoods often led to the mass displacement of low-income residents. The gaps left by private and governmental efforts necessitated a greater degree of community activism, seeking to address housing discrimination and promote more affordable housing for Newark's residents. But, despite its struggles, the movement towards a Newark Renaissance has become increasingly plausible, if not unstoppable. Newark's importance as a hub for transportation and commerce necessitated its eventual recovery from the depression of its past. Downtown developments have assisted Newark back on the path to prosperity, increasing housing prices in the New York City area, are boosting Newark's population, land values, and tax base. The outer wards are now seeing a lot of new construction and renovations. It still has a long way to go, but Newark is on the way to overcome its blighted past and re-emerge as a stronger and more equitable city.